Okay, this is Taryn McGuire. Taryn is a kindergarten teacher, and we are at Elliott Elementary, and we are working on her post-observation. So, Taryn, just to kind of start with, let's talk with, how do you feel it went? Talk to me about, with your lesson, how you thought it went.
I thought compared to, I think we're growing a lot on our thoughts about books and stories compared to, this is week 5 of our making meetings, so compared to week 1, they really have grown a lot. Still, the time frame is kind of a struggle with them. It gets a little bit long.
Especially with kindergartners.
Yep. The focus is there with most, but not all. Definitely have some that have strengths that help the others and others that aren't quite there yet.
Yeah.
For sure.
And as we're going through, and we're kind of talking about things, we're going to kind of look at 2 main categories. One, we're going to say, okay, what did I feel were some of your strengths during your lesson? And then at the end, we're going to talk about, or the second half, we're going to talk about what are some areas for growth. And so with that, kind of talking about your strength areas, one area that I identified that I thought was pretty strong, which goes along with something that we've been focusing on this year, and I've really tried to let the staff know that we want to get better at, and that's our classroom management. So talk to me, what do you notice about the students' abilities? What do you notice in that category? What is it? How do you feel about that? What do you notice?
I think that they are better understanding expectations. We aren't testing quite as much as we were, but just following through with what we're supposed to be doing. I try and continually remind them because even though they're just 5,
Yeah.
we just have to be redirected or reminded of what we're going to do, even if it takes up the first 3 minutes of my lesson. I don't think that it's a part that we can go without. I'd say one thing that I didn't do this time that I tried to do, and I know I didn't, point out like an example of a positive with someone. I really like the way Isabel did this, or something like that I know I've done and did not do today, to show those good examples. But
And as you're talking about that, some of the things I wrote down, I was just collecting some data, some anecdotal data that kind of was talking about things that you did, and one of the things I noticed that connected right with our kind of the goal that we focused on, but also the Iowa standards that talked about when you first came into class, you asked the students to start identifying some things that they needed to do just to kind of kick the lesson off. Crisscross applesauce, the kids shared, raise hands, listen, look at people, talking and keeping their hands to themselves. And when I was looking at that, I was also thinking about our Capturing Kids' Hearts that we've done. So talk about how you think that's working in with the Capturing Kids' Hearts.
oh, it aligns perfectly. It fits right in there with it. And they continually look at their social contract, and we made our reading together poster over here, and they continually go back to that. And then we decided that we were going to put reading together / writing together because we've been using it at writing. I think that they've just figured out that that's just how we act in here. Maybe not just during that making meaning time, but at all parts of our day.
So moving forward, thinking about those things that went well, let's talk about one thing you feel confident about moving forward, but maybe an area that you're thinking, hey, in the future I need to be looking, I need to be keeping my hand on this to kind of keep an idea, because you're perceiving this might be a problem moving forward.
Which one do you want? Mine?
Yeah, start with what you feel pretty confident about.
I feel like the kids are understanding the stories that we're reading. I think that they are excited about them and are able to verbalize with their friends and with us things that, they're retaining what we read. They are getting something out of it. We're working on speaking in complete sentences, and maybe the best way to redirect or keep the entire class focused, and also our class, our partner discussions are weak with most of us.
Okay.
I only have a couple that are really strong at that. And in all honesty, if you would have seen the first week, it really has
Sure.
improved, so I know that it will continue to improve, because the first week that we did it was, I really wish I would have recorded it, because it really has gotten a lot stronger. So I will, like I had said to you before, I think the next time we change partners at a new unit,
Okay,
that I think that to help with modeling, I'll put some of my stronger speakers with my weaker ones to show a good example of what that looks like and sounds like, to help some of those ones that are struggling.
sure. So we had talked about that, so hearing you say that putting those other students with it, I think is pretty, looking forward, and I think that's a real strength. At the end, when you hear students reflect, when you were talking about them reflecting about how that went, because today was about building that community,
Yep.
like you had shared, how do you feel, your lesson focused on building community, how do you feel that went at the end? Talk to me about that.
I was very happy with their answers and responses. Honestly, we try and reflect every single time. And not always, I don't always get the
Sure.
best responses. I was very happy with, and I think that they are consciously thinking about it now. And it's because I make them.
That reflection
I
piece is
love
so
that.
big, because it goes right along with one of the other things that I marked in here for your strength, when I was kind of pulling some of those pieces of the data, was you were constantly asking the kids to think deeper. And I know that you would just, I heard you say earlier that that's a piece that you were kind of worried about, you're working on getting
Yep.
into.
Yep.
But questions that you were asking, a student would share something and you would say, okay, tell me more about that, or what part
Right.
of the pictures,
Yep, helped you figure that out, yeah,
yeah.
yep, nuts.
So how do you feel? That's okay. Are they just gonna wait for Miss Lori?
I asked her.
Well, she might not be out there yet, so she might be in that transition time.
They're staying out at recess with Mrs. Watson.
Oh, so they need to go back out. Go back outside.
They're videotaping my post conference right now.
Go back out.
I didn't tell Dawn, I thought Lori would be out there.
Sure.
Okay.
So I think that's another one of your strengths, is encouraging those kids to think deeper. And I think that's interesting because you're worried about that, but I really felt like that's not something that,
It's something that I've had to, I don't think it was something that I naturally did, but
Sure.
it's something that, after 8 years of teaching kindergarten, I think I
Mhm.
understand a lot more how important it is.
to keep asking them those probing questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that was I think that's great that you're doing
I
that.
think I was so quick to just, I know it, and so
Mhm.
I just answer for them type thing.
Sure.
Well, remember, but they were smiling here, instead of asking them, you know, what made you think that they were happy? You know,
Yeah.
I would have just said, yep, you're right, they were smiling in the story,
Mhm.
so they were happy, and yeah, that's a whole different shift that I've had to have too.
So thinking about that lesson today, what are your next steps? Anything you do different in the future? Think about moving forward now with that.
Definitely am anxious to regroup on partners. We do that in one more week. I'm
Mhm.
really anxious to see how a new partner will maybe pull some of the other ones, things out of them. Possibly, I don't know the best way to be able to hear all their conversations.
Yeah,
That's
as
one
they're
thing.
sitting on the floor and
Mhm.
you're there.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I mean, when we did our module for the Making Meaning, like the professional development thing with it, it did show the instructor sitting just like I am, but I've pulled up groups at a time
Sure.
too and listened like to their conversation, and then pulled up another two and they talk
Mhm.
again. So I think I think I'll start doing that a little bit more.
One thing to think
Mhm.
about as I was sitting and watching, you could even go sit next to a group or two
Mhm.
and give your attention to them with that eye contact that you talked about. So
Right.
just give that to them and just say, I'd like to listen, and then you can just turn and look at that other one
Mhm.
and just, try to keep
Down there with them.
yeah,
and
down
do
there
that.
with them.
Mhm.
I think that'd really help, and that will let them, you're also then modeling those,
Right.
those
Right.
same things you were talking about with them at the beginning of class, so. Well, I've got some of that data that I can share with you here on this doc that just talks about that record keeping that I was keeping those questions, so that's a great job with that. Some areas for growth. that we talked about yesterday a little bit. One of them was kind of that clearly identified goal at the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, I think it was in there, but tell me about how you think you can get better at that.
Right. Just at the very beginning, when I have them revisit our reading together chart and the things that we're trying to do to become better readers, it's kind of one of those things that I don't state it clearly enough. I don't just kind of then jump right into the lesson. So I think I need to pause, clearly state it just for the kiddos, but for myself on, the main objective of my lesson.
I even think that's a learning thing for us as adults.
I do.
Like when we're in our meetings and stuff, that's something I'm trying to reflect on and say, okay, why do I have the staff here? What do we need to
What's
talk
the
about?
main thing that we want to get out of this?
Yeah,
And I think that was something that you challenged me as you said that. So what's the main thing that you want to get out of this? Okay, had I really even fully been through that? And I thought,
Sure.
yes, I do know, but I need to stress it more with them. That way they clearly understand what we're trying to do too.
so think about that. What sort of things could you do?
Well, revisiting and talking about things, having them tell me how we're reading together, and even just me more clearly stating it.
Sure.
That I didn't even use, I have before, but I didn't today even use that word reading community.
Yeah.
And that's one word that when we first started doing this, the first couple weeks, I was always stressing that word reading community, reading together, and talking about what a community was and stuff. So I need to just go back to that,
Sure.
that I had done earlier.
How could you get, because sometimes one of the best things to do is encourage those kids to be a part of that themselves. How could we get the kids involved to help hold them accountable to do that too? What could we do that might get those kids involved to help hold them accountable too, so that they're,
Well, the one thing that we did was make this poster together. All those things that we put up
Okay.
there were their ideas, what they wanted to do over there. It wasn't stuff that I said, this is what we're going to do. They came up with all of those ideas, and then I just put it into a poster. So when we revisit that, just, I guess, remind them that those are the things that you guys decided that you wanted
Sure.
to do over here, to have them have ownership in it.
yeah? So could you add anything to that that would help?
Yes, and the one that's white over there, that do not interrupt, was one that we added later on,
Okay.
because it was one that we decided that as we revisit it, we should say, is there anything else that we
Yeah.
could put up there that you think would help us now? And I haven't done that for a while, but we have before. The pink ones were the ones that they came up
Yeah.
with initially, and then the white one, we added later on. So I should revisit with them if there's anything else that we should add up there.
And maybe try to guide them to, what's our purpose for reading? Is that what I'm hearing you
Yep.
say?
Yep.
I feel like that'd be a powerful
Yep.
thing for every time you read.
And I really like this IDR piece that we started yesterday,
Mhm.
because that's what was the main focus of what we were talking about, like why we read and that.
What's
we
our
read.
purpose on it? Yeah. That's
And they
awesome.
loved it, so I was so excited to tell them we were doing that later, and that most of them were excited. So, that's awesome.
So we talk, as we're talking about that, an area that, that clearly identified goal, then we start thinking about, okay, how do we know that the students have achieved that? And I know you had shared with me an artifact that you had to kind of do that. So do you want to pull that up and we can
Yeah.
kind of go through that together?
Yep. So this is on day 2
Okay.
of each of our lessons on the second day. It's just kind of a checklist to go
Mhm.
through on the different areas.
So when we look at this, we ask ourselves, are the students contributing ideas to discussion? Would you say all, half, or only a few?
I would say most students were contributing. There was even one that, you have the few kind of shy ones, but I intentionally, Rihanna comes to mind. I know, I think that she's always listening, but she's not the one that raises her hand or speaks out, and I had called on her intentionally to see, and she still was right on track with
Okay.
everything, so I would say most.
I was thinking that as we were working through that. Are the students' ideas centered on the story?
Most, and that is one thing that I continually have to redirect. Okay, but does this go along? Because, we start talking about a class pet and then we're talking about our pet at home,
Yeah.
or something. So, for the most part, and that's definitely a struggle that I continue to refocus.
Okay, so are they having difficulty listening to the story, you feel like?
It depends. This one was a little bit longer than some of them, and we haven't done a nonfiction book yet.
Sure.
I think some of them enjoyed it and maybe it wasn't the best for some of them.
Yeah,
They definitely have books that are their favorites, and we've talked about that, that's okay. We have
Mhm.
favorite food, we can have big favorite books, you know,
Yeah.
favorite movies, that type thing. But there were a few that are struggling through sitting there.
sure.
Even when we had talked about what we look like and stuff over here, and I don't know the answer, I don't know for sure what to do with
Sure.
those couple that, you know, to a point, as long as they can still hear
Mhm.
me and are getting something out of the story and they're not bothering their peers.
Because you're in a unique situation, I think you, not unique, but you've got the younger kiddos. So how can we frame that so that those, you know, because there's gonna be those couple ones, but how do we reach
Mhm.
those couple ones?
Right, right, and that's where, you know, the one kiddo in the back was up on his knees most of the time, but he was in the back. He
Sure.
wasn't really bothering anyone. When I called on him, he did give me a pretty solid answer that went
Sure.
along with what we were talking about, so,
And that was actually one thing I had in here, so let's, because this will go right along with that, for my notes that I'd taken, wait time.
yeah,
That might be something to think about for that. And,
and we're continually talking about, okay, let's think in our own heads right now, because we're so quick to, even before I've asked the full question, they just raise their hand.
yeah.
Okay, let's take a second, no raising hands, no blurting.
Mhm.
Let's think about my entire question and think about it in your head for a second. That way you have a clear thought and idea to share with your partner, share out to the class or whatever.
Sure.
And that's been a struggle. I mean, something that we're trying to.
So as a teacher
Improve on.
facilitating that, I think sometimes we're presented as challenges too. Because sometimes we're quick to go on to the
Yep.
next thing and we lose that.
Yep.
Couple strategies that might help you. Just one thing I've seen done and work well and I've done is saying things like, oh, I see some of the students' brains are thinking. I see some of the students have come up with an idea. Some of you are still thinking. I'll wait until some of you get a chance to think a little
Yeah.
bit longer, just to encourage that. I think sometimes that also forces those kids who maybe weren't thinking at all,
Right.
we're holding them accountable. So, and that was just one of the other things I had kind of for that growth area, to keep thinking about.
And I even said before, like, okay, we're not gonna raise our hands at all. Everyone needs to have an idea in their head.
Yep.
That way they all have something, not just the 5 kiddos that were raising their hands.
Sure. So, increasing the identifying the learning goal, we kind of talked about how we can do that. I
Yep.
think that's a great idea that you came
But yeah,
up
to
with there.
revisit it too, to, add to it
Yep.
also.
So moving forward, as we're leaving here, what sort of things should we put into place? Say, hey, I want to focus on that. Let's come up with an item or two that would be something that you really want to touch on. And we can talk about maybe your responsibility for that and my responsibility, how I can help you.
Okay. Well, I would like to revisit and remind the kids of their ownership of it. I guess I think that we just go to it and it's a poster that I made type thing, but remind them that those were their ideas. And I think the social contract, that's the case. I think that they remember that they made that up, but to remind them that they are the ones that have ownership in that. And they also can add or, you know,
Be a part of it.
yeah, right, I don't think that,
Because
I
they're
think
the
I did
authors of
initially, but then now I
Sure.
don't think that I have been giving them the ownership in it anymore. It's
Think
just
about how you
been,
can tie that back to authors.
right,
And how, when you have, and so they can become the authors of it.
Right.
They can,
yeah,
and how I can help with that, I think one thing I would do is the next time I'm in kind of doing my walkthrough and stuff, that's something we can check in and maybe
Mm-hmm.
talk with the kids. I can pull a student or two as I'm pulling up a chair next to them to say, hey,
Right.
tell me about that.
right.
Any
Yeah,
other item you think you'd like to continue to grow in?
well, my focus at the beginning of
Okay,
the lesson,
yeah.
for
Sharing
sure,
that.
yeah.
we kinda
And I
put
don't
it-
know if that's something that, you know, I put it in my notes right above,
Sure.
a sticky note right on the top of the
Mhm.
day, so that I think
Mhm.
that that would make me, one, have thought it through,
Yeah.
and 2, know that I was going to say it.
Mhm.
So, I think that that's something that I'll try and do with each of my, before I get to it.
And as I'm doing to help you with that, as I'm doing my walkthroughs, maybe I can put a little card that says, here's what I identified as the goal, if I see the
This,
beginning.
mhm.
And if I don't see the beginning, then you could even say, I can leave a note, and then you could put it back in my box, and we can check in
Okay.
that way.
Okay,
Other than that, thank you for your time and look forward to the next time.
Yes.